We are going to be going over the left hand bass clef lines for a selection called Bells Are Ringing, which is in the G major hand position. In this particular exercise, you will recognize this song from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Choral Symphony. It's also been used in different adaptations. This particular book calls it Bells Are Ringing, but it's all essentially the same song. So in this exercise, we're going to break down the left-handed notes. So the simple part about it is the D note, which is the higher tone note that we'll be using our thumb for, is going to kind of act like a constant. So in other words, we'll be kind of using that same note throughout. So our first dyad is going to start off with a D and a G. Our next dyad is going to move up by one key on the lower end and stay with a D on the high end. So this will be a D and an A. The next one will be a D and a B, and the fourth one will be a D and a C. Moving on to line 2, it's almost going to be the same thing. We're going to have a D and a G, followed by a D and an A, next a D and a B, and then the last measure on line 2 will be a D and a C as a half note and a D and a B as a half note. If you notice, the rest of these lines were all whole notes. Moving on to line 3, we continue with a little bit more of the half note movement. You're going to see a D and a C, and then we're going to go lower in the opposite direction, a D and a B, a D and an A D and a G, and then we're going to go back up a little bit, D and C, D and B. We have this one random C sharp, which we'll kind of discuss a little bit, and then we end with a half note D. Going on to line 4 is actually going to be the exact same notes that we did in line 2. We have a D and a G, followed by a D and an a D and a B, and then we end with a D and a C and a D and a B. Now when I play these notes on my actual piano, my first group was D and G. So we have D and G, 1, 2, 3, 4, then D and A, 1, 2, 3, 4, D and B, 2, 3, 4, D and C, 2, 3, that was line 1, line 2, D and G, 1, 2, 3, 4, D and A, 2, 3, 4, D and B, 2, 3, 4. Now our half notes, D and C, D and B. Moving on to line 3, we're at the halfway point. We have D and C, D and B, D and A, D and G, D and C, D and B, and then we have our first sharp note that we're using. The note is going to be C sharp. As you noticed in the music, we see the left hand bass clef C note, middle C, and we see a sharp symbol next to it. So that means that we're going to hit the black key that's to the right of our C. So if this is our middle C, then this note would be C sharp. Okay, so we're going to hit one C sharp for a half note, 1, 2, and then a D by itself, 3, 4. Moving on to line 4, the final line. Remember, this is the exact same notes as line 2. D and G, 1, 2, 3, 4, D and A, 2, 3, 4, D and B, 2, 3, 4, D and C, 2, and 3, 4 is a D and a B. So I'm